Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. When I venture out into the ultra distance races, I like to wear Iron Horse Ultra 100 swag to promote our local race. And that's essentially how I met my next guest. 3 years ago, at the start line of the Black Spur Ultra in Kimberley, BC, he recognized the swag and introduced himself. We talked for a bit at the start line. And then it was, of course, bang, a 54K tramp up and over mountains, through trees and whatever. It was about the halfway point when Chris Postill, who's joining me now, passed me. And that was the last time I saw him that day. But we did manage to connect on Facebook and have kept in touch from there. And since I started this podcast, Chris has been a great supporter, an active listener. And I've often thought, what kind of a guy finds my hobby so interesting? Well, that's exactly who I have to bring on my show. So pleased to welcome fellow ultra distance runner, businessman, family man, Chris Postill. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This is really exciting. I think you talked me up a little more than, especially on the ultra runner side of things.
Well,
I've done a few, but definitely no Jay Kinsella or anyone along those lines.
No. Neither am I. Like I said, I think I've got 5 confirmed finishes on the ultra circuit. So technically you can consider yourself, if you've done at least one, you're an ultra distance runner, right?
Absolutely.
But, on top of this though, it's you're kind of saving my bacon here a little bit, because I like to do the bi-weekly shows here, and I was having trouble scheduling people, and then all of a sudden we've been talking about having you on for a little bit here, back and forth. It fell into place. So not only thank you for being able to do this for me, but also driving 2 hours to be here, taking a drive all the way from Warrenville, Alberta to beautiful St. Paul. And I know you're a busy guy with work, with family, and of course, we're going to sneak in a run later too, right? Because you are doing some training yourself. So awesome. So again, thank you so much. It's basically though, I mean, we've had a few conversations, like face to face, maybe a handful of times, but when you're in and around these big runs, I mean, if you don't happen to fall into pace, you don't spend a lot of time with these people. It's kind of a meet and greet at the start, and then maybe. So this is really the first time we get to sit down face to face and actually kind of get to know you a little bit here. So let's start with you were born in New Brunswick.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I was born in Chatham.
And you lived in Victoria for a while, and you mentioned everywhere in between.
Yeah, so I was born in Chatham. My mom was married to a military fella.
Okay.
We moved to Toronto. I actually had a speech impediment, so I had to see a specialist, and we moved to Toronto for that time frame. Moved back to Chatham, and my parents separated. We moved out to Victoria, where my mom's parents lived, to kind of get reset. We lived with my grandparents for a year while she was getting back on her feet. Then we finally got in our own house again. She met my stepdad, another man in uniform. She likes the guy's uniform. We ended up moving to Petawawa, and he got accepted to go to UNB for his degree. We moved out to Ormocto, Gagetown, New Brunswick, and then he was going to do his master's, so we moved to Kingston, Ontario. And then from there, I did all my early high school years in Kingston, Ontario. That's where I fell in love with rugby and all kinds of different stuff from their standpoint. And yeah, we moved out to Morinville. And honestly, I finished my high school here. I went to Concordia University for a year. My parents' design, not mine. And that's why it was only a year long. But yeah, I honestly just love Alberta, and it gets a bad rap. It gets slagged on all the time, but the people are great. There's a lot of opportunity, and it's just a beautiful country out here.
So I guess you kind of answered my question. You've been coast to coast and how you settle in Morinville, but that's still home for you, obviously.
Yeah.
What is it you do for a living?
I have a small project controls company. So we co-founded it back in 2017. It's called Progressive Plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a steam fitter by trade. I worked the uranium mines in Saskatchewan, oil field in northern Alberta, southern Alberta, all over the place. And we were sitting around one day, my fellow partner there, Curtis, that I co-founded it with back in 2016. We were working on a site together out here in Fort Saskatchewan. And we realized, there's better ways to do business here. And we just kind of got tired of being treated like numbers and didn't like how other people were treated like numbers. And so we started a company and realized we do things a little differently.
So you mentioned it's basically like it's consulting with turnarounds. Is there turnarounds obviously can be a vast array of industry that you would do that kind of work in. Do you have is it specific to oil field related, or you mentioned Fort Saskatchewan where there's a lot of chemical industry? Or is it everything under the sun?
We do a lot of work with maintenance as well, and with projects. But shutdowns is our bread and butter. We brought on a third partner in the last year, so we've expanded, and he's a former turnaround manager, 40-year guy. So just an incredible asset within the company. But yeah, more directly to your question, it's mostly oil and gas, chemicals, fertilizer. Basically, whoever needs it can use the support. Because what we did actually, what's interesting is nobody else has done this, is we went to a remote concept before COVID. So back in 2019, we had this idea saying, listen, we can actually support this remotely and leveraging subject matter experts all over the world. Because essentially our mindset to this was, for an example, like an Alpha Laval amine exchanger is the same exchanger that's used in Fort Saskatchewan, that's used in Venezuela, that's used in Australia. So outside of your local requirements for occupational health and safety and whatnot, the materials, the process for pulling that amine exchanger parts can be exactly the same.
Right.
So we realized, hang on here, we could actually service this and save them a lot of cost and bring extra value and a higher return on that investment, as opposed to now we're looking at it saying, listen, guys, this is an investment, not an expense. You're investing in your improvement, not expensing it by saying, oh, we got to bring in all these extra costs, got to bring in all these extra contractors.
You had mentioned, I guess, people getting treated like numbers within these big industries. How did your company change that, or how does it change that?
Yeah, so when we first started, the idea was to pay people a little more by taking a little less, and then optimizing our overhead expenses.
Okay.
Instead of saying, listen, we're going to bring you in at $40 an hour, we're going to bill you out $85 an hour, we're going to make a bunch of money, and we don't really care if you're here or not. We just need a warm body because we're making double your wages, right?
Right.
And so we really put a focus on bringing in good people, putting them into good positions, and supporting them as much as we can. So it means that we got to work a little harder on our end from the leadership standpoint. However, our people are super happy, and the clients are realizing the benefits of that now, and the payoff is saying, instead of just treating them like numbers, they're getting treated like people, and they have an opportunity to grow and different opportunities to experience new.
Funny how that works. Not the first time I've seen the success of that policy with people I've talked to. So, so you mentioned that people work for you. How big is your employee base?
We got the 3 partners, and we still work. We still work in the business, and then we've got 4 working for us currently now as well.
Okay, so it's
directly.
It's a fairly small.
It is, yeah.
Okay,
it is. But we've got like I said, based on the subscription service that we are building out right now. So essentially, what this is the clients can come in and you pay a subscription fee every month. You get access to so many hours, you get access to so many people, and you get access to the entire team. Instead of bringing in an entire team to support one service and having people sitting around with lost time because you may only need them for 10 hours in a given week, now you only pay for those services as you need them.
Right.
And a lot of those folks are working full-time jobs. They're working elsewhere. They're contractors on their own. They're consultants. So full-time, we have those 7 of us, including the 3 directors.
Right.
But we have access to much larger pool of people that help us part-time as needed when needed.
Makes sense. So the whole thing, like you said, you had developed this before COVID. So how important was that when this pandemic hit, that people had this availability already in place?
Yeah, it's worked out well. I mean, not to take advantage of COVID or anything, but it's one of those things that we really wanted to do, and we thought it was a different way of doing business. And it's funny because when we tried to pitch this idea to people, remote support and everything else, everyone looked at us like we were absolutely bananas. They said, well, that's not going to work. That doesn't make sense because that's not how we do business. And that's something that we hear quite often. I'm sure everyone does. That's not how we do business around here. It's not. We've never done it this way. This, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, it's been since COVID hit, people, they forced their staff out of the office. They realized, wait a minute, we actually don't need to have 70 people working here. Oh my gosh, we can actually trust our people to get their work done by empowering them to do the work. Oh wow, this is a crazy concept. So yeah, it's been beneficial that way.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I'm talking to a lot of people who through different jobs and everything that they do, that a lot of companies are finding that because they were forced to work remotely with COVID, that now they can, and how much cost they're saving with things like, well, they're not paying as much rent on space and everything like that. There's just a lot more efficiencies. There's less commuting going on and everything like that. So it's funny how you guys seem to have this already in place, and we're thinking ahead, not necessarily saying that you were seeing it as a solution to pandemic problems, but maybe just a cost-saving problem, period, that a pandemic forced other companies to actually buy into now. So do you find now it's maybe easier pitching your...
I do. But again, I think depending on who we're pitching and where we're pitching, because we do have contracts across the country. I was just on the call here 3 hours ago with an individual I collaborate with down in New Mexico. He's over in San Diego getting on a plane. So we were talking about some business strategy down there. So I guess in that regard, it kind of depends on where we're kind of pitching it. Alberta is very traditional in a lot of senses. So a lot of people still like, now that we can get back to the office, they want them back in the office, which is fine. If that's how you run your business, that's okay too, right? There's a lot of merit to having people close proximity. However, there's a lot of hallway conversations that don't get recorded. There's a lot of information that's conveyed that also plays the old game of telephone where, hey, Ben, if we can do this. And then when you go next door and tell John, well, you're telling him a different information than I told you. And we never wrote it down because we already saw each other. Right. So a lot of that still happens too. So I think there needs to be a happy medium, a bit of a balance. Right. But, and our whole concept is just to supplement and support. Like we're not there to replace jobs. And I think that's been the key that people seem to think is you're going to hire a company to come in and, well, you're going to hire them. I'm not going to have a planning job anymore. No, we're going to offset your tasks so you can optimize your time on site.
Right. Changing gears a little bit here. Let's go back to the one of the things we share quite in common is the ultra distance running. I know it's not something you just wake up one morning and I'm going to run any distance that's farther than a marathon. How did you get into something like this? What's your story? Because everyone has a unique one with this.
Yeah. 2014. I always enjoyed running, like small, short track stuff. I like doing I used to think like 4 or 5K. I'd go get a nice big, feel good about it, right? Yeah. And try to increase that speed. You do it in 25, 30 minutes and be like, right on, crushed, right? Like you'd sprint it or whatever. And I always felt good, but I never really ran much more than that. Like as far as cross country, I didn't get into cross country in high school or anything along those lines. David Pino and Julie Pino, friends of mine. You've probably crossed past them as well. May not know them, but they've been on this whole ultra circuit as well.
Okay.
And they always did a team up to that point at Sinister 7 called the Twisted Blisters. That's where we came in. Do you guys have a Twisted Blisters here? That's why Jim and I, we were to team this, and we were going to do that because they've been doing the Twisted Blisters on Sinister.
Right.
And Jim and I were a part of that team. And they said, hey, why don't you come run with us? And I thought, okay. It was did like 7, so 10.7K. And I remember it. It was like this thing. And I thought it was the craziest thing. And I thought, man, I'm going to run in the bush like 10K. And I thought, wow, but it's funny now thinking back. But I thought it was the coolest, craziest thing, right? Yeah. Up to me, it was just, I thought it was super exciting. So we went down to Sinister. And I honestly, as soon as I saw the culture of all the runners, and it wasn't a competitive thing, like, because I did run track, like I said, in high school, but it was all like sprinting, right? And it was everyone stuck to their team. Everyone was like very much like, I'm going to win. And it was very competitive, but I got there and I didn't feel that at all. And I know there's people that do compete and it's amazing. Like they're incredible athletes, but what I was drawn to was the love, the hugs. Everybody's like, it was like a friend, like a high school reunion almost, is the way I thought of it.
It's funny you mention it that way because it's definitely what we experience as volunteers and organizers with the Iron Horse Ultra, which we're very familiar with, at least for myself. But going to the other races and seeing the same people, it's absolutely you hit the nail on the head, like a high school reunion. It's like it's a really family environment. And even the elite runners that you see that are setting course records, there may be a little bit of a competitive edge if there's a couple of them that are on the same wavelength as far as running, but overall they're almost more impressed with the people that are taking 8 hours longer to finish a race because of the mental grind that is than their own ability to run it that much faster. It's I don't know what the word, maybe empowering for someone to have someone that elite looking at you admirably. And I find that has happened
Yeah.
at these events.
Yeah, like I made the joke about Jay earlier, but I could say it about the Dalkey brothers or any of those big names in the ultra game for that hero.
Yeah.
I've never seen any of those folks not say thank you to a volunteer.
Yeah.
I've never seen them not encourage someone else that was trying and struggling, like on a relay team. Because you, as a relayist, you could say, "Oh, well, I'm not doing any." It's easy to get in that mode and say, "Wow, I'm only doing 20K. Like I'm doing nothing."
Yeah.
But they come up to you and say, "You're doing a great job." Like I've never seen those top tier ultra athletes never sit there and encourage other people to do the great work. And that's what blows me away. I think that's what really drew me to it was just that being humble, but being incredibly well at your craft, but also being humble at it, And I find that's the entire trail running community. It's all of them are like that.
I think no matter how good you are at this this sport or this activity, that any ultra distance race can humble a person.
Yeah.
Being out there, whether it's 10 or 20 hours,
that's right.
It'll wear on you in ways. And how many ultras have you competed in?
Oh, competed or finished? Both.
Both can be pretty impressive in their own right?
Well, not as much as I would have liked, but the one year I did when I came out here for Iron Horse and did that was my first 100, and I think that was 2019. That was just before COVID. And I've done Black Spur. Let me think here. Well, we've done a relay as a soloist or relays because we used to do Sinister every single year as a relay. But if I go just solo, probably 20, 30.
Wow.
Somewhere in between there. Yeah.
Quite a ways ahead of me on that.
Well, again, as far as finish though, I'd say I've done, about a half dozen 50s, this 100. And yeah, I've done, we did 100K on the Blackfoot, but I only did the 70K, 75 of that. I did 3 of the 4 loops. And there's a few others that, like Sinister, I went in for a solo attempt in 2019 as well. I got to like 4, so about 92K on that one. That one's a grueling beast.
I'm thinking long and hard about whether or not I ever want to try that one, but I know they have some shorter distances that you can challenge yourself with now. But initially it was just 100 miles. You kind of say things that only an ultra distance runner will say, right? I only did 75 at the Blackfoot. I was supposed to do 100, but I only did 75.
Yeah,
that's the other side of the coin.
Yeah,
I
guess, right? Yeah, that's true. That's true. But it's funny, like sitting on that with a friend of, Jim Chernichin, and I split that with him. We're sitting there one day. We were at Sinister. We said, let's go split 100K at Iron Horse. And we both kind of chuckled and did that. And we came out here, and it was funny because that last leg, that swamp at the very bottom, before you get onto the dirt road, you got to go through that little bog.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but I totally forgot. So when Derek Scarvin and I came out and both ran, we were side by side doing it. I told him, I said, yeah, we just got to get through this spot here. There's a couple hills, and then we're going to be on the dirt roads forever. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And I don't know what happened, but we got down in that bog, and it was just awful, right? It was like the tree broke. We're stuck in there. We're laughing about it. And he's like, what happened to all of this? Like, how could you not remember any of this? And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I apologize. I must have totally I was thinking of those rolling gravel hills and I could see town getting closer. And I was like, oh, this is a breeze. This is awesome. I don't know how I forgot that. Right. But
some people have nicknamed it Sleepy Hollow because when you're running it at night, it gets a little closed in and creepy there. So
totally.
There's, any one of these runners in any one race, you run 100 kilometers, 100 miles, there's 100 stories with just one individual. So, this is a whole series of podcasts we could do. In fact, there are a lot on there too, but
I got bit by a dog on that run, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was nothing to be, it was hilarious. It shocked the hell out of both of us. We were going on those rolling hills, Derek and I, on that year, and we're coming up and we're like, because we're, we've been out, we're at like 90K in at this point or whatever the heck it is, right? And you're feeling it. And we thought, we just want to get into town, and we're going along, and there was a house that had a bonfire.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about.
It was so funny because the dog, and it's not like the dog bit me. It was just kind of nipping because the dog was excited, right? Like, I got a dog like that too. But we were walking along, and all of a sudden it was just nip on the hand. And it just threw us off because it was pitch black,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
they waved at us, or you could hear them as they go by, kind of laughing and chuckling.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just like, what? Oh yeah, it was like, what was that? Derek's like, that dog just nipped you? Is it? Yeah, he did. Yeah, so we had a good chuckle.
I know the place and the family really well, and they've actually resorted now because you're not the only one
really?
that's had a nip from the dog. They make sure she's inside for race weekend there.
Oh
so
yeah,
that,
yeah. I laughed.
and I've done some training runs past there, and I've make sure you walk and don't turn. Like your owner says, don't turn your back on that bitch because she'll bite you.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not crazy.
So no, and you're not the only one.
That's hilarious.
I mentioned too in the beginning there, Chris, you're a family man. You have 3 kids?
3 boys,
Three
yeah.
boys, okay.
3
And,
wild boys.
What are their ages at?
8, 6, and 4. Well, 4 and 2 weeks.
Wow,
So
you're
8, 6, and 4.
Right in the thick of it there.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
the fun times are coming.
It is.
The grocery bills are going to be getting.
It is Scrap City. It is basically a different.
Oh boy. How long have you been married?
I've been married now 12 years.
Okay.
We got, let me make sure. Yeah, we got married in 2010, so 12 years. I've been together since 2007, though. So we dated for a few before we got married,
Right
so
on.
15 years.
Was she a local from Warrenville as well?
She is, yeah. She's 2 years younger, and she knew who I was in high school. I didn't know who she was because, again, she's 2 years younger.
Right.
And she thought I was a douchebag, essentially. Yeah. So that was her first, like, wow, he's an arrogant douchebag.
I bring it up because we've been texting a little bit back and forth, and you mentioned that you guys have had some struggles and stuff too. Did you wanna?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. This is the interesting part because there was struggles, which is I think a lot of people, especially going into COVID, didn't really realize. And I didn't realize that there was struggles on that front, but I knew something was wrong because everything in my life was almost like collapsing, if you know what I mean. And that goes back to 2019 before COVID, actually. And so it was just, I just wasn't happy with who I was. Just being miserable. I was grumpy with the kids, and they don't deserve that ever, right? Like, because the kids are just kids, and just grumpy towards them. And it just wasn't fair to Andrea. And it's funny because it wasn't until later in 2020, looking back, I can tell this story and realizing it. But she told me straight up one night, we sat around, she's just straight up told me, like, if it wasn't for the kids, I would have packed up and left. And it wasn't like abusive or anything along those lines. It was just rude. Right. And it gets tiresome. You know, it's just being an asshole, essentially, right? And just people just don't deserve that. It's just disrespectful, and it's just not fair. So yeah, I just didn't like who I was, and just, you know, you're always working, you're always hustling, and you didn't get the chance to stop and realize what kind of an asshole you were being. And so I took the time in 2020, I was working out of town, 2019, I was working out of town, and it was just a really, really rough go. And I realized, look, I shut down and had lots of time, and I spent a lot of time reading, a lot of time running. And for anyone that's not a runner, trust me, physical activity is gonna change your world the more you do it. But that's a side note.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on personal development books and really kind of focusing on myself. That I realized was there's you know, everyone has a view, has a viewpoint of who we are, including ourselves. And I took the Johari window as an example, where we've got our known knowns and our unknown unknowns, and in between we've got the known unknowns and the unknowns. And, you know, with those traits, there's traits that we don't know and that you don't know because we haven't tapped them. But there's things that you see in me that I don't see. So I did this and I don't know if I fully endorse this for everyone, because you have to be ready for what you read. Right. I did this anonymous survey, and I sent it out to a bunch of people on Facebook and different kind of avenues, and texted it to people and encouraged people to take it. And on that survey, you had a list of questions, and you could define like 3 words that define me, da 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 da, and what's your opinion about this, da 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 da. And it was like 10 questions or something. I don't know what it was. There was somewhere in that ballpark, but they were filling the blanks and different stuff. And so I filled the survey out, sent it out, gave everyone a week to fill it out. And I got all these numbers back, and I took all the numbers, and it was a lot of the descriptions on who I was interesting to me. And you could almost pinpoint at what point in my life I met these people, based on how they described me. And it was tough. I'll be honest with you. A lot of it was tough to read. Like when
Yeah.
when people define you, you know, whether it was arrogant or whatever, right? Like, and there's descriptors in there where no one wants to hear, but it's there and it's out in the open now, and that's how people see you. So what are you going to do about it? That's the question you got to
Right.
ask, and that's what I did ask. Okay, well, I've got this information now. And so I went on Facebook Live and I did this video and just kind of said, listen, yeah, I haven't been who I was. And I sent some formal apologies to people that deserve them and needed them. And I just made a plan to focus on, you know, where I need to improve, and basically took all that information and just kind of painted a picture of who I was. And, you know, I'm not doing it to conform to other people's wishes of who they want me to be. It's just who I want to be. And then, you know,
Right.
what am I portraying? Who am I? Because at the same token, you know, my kids are going to see that too, right? So
I'm glad you threw that out there for me to bring up in the podcast, because I think there's a lot of and I don't know if it was the pandemic that has had it, but I think it's affected a lot of attitudes, and that sometimes people need to take that step back or hear some things. And yeah, I don't know, because I've had, as things have reopened up, I find I'm not as comfortable out with groups anymore. It's a weird thing, because I'm usually a pretty social person, but I've had trouble going, like, you know, you're excited to go somewhere, but like to a hockey game, I'm a little bit,
yeah,
I'm always looking over my shoulder now. Like and I don't know if that necessarily is if everybody's feeling it, or if there's more extreme versions of it, or situations like that. But it's nice to know that there's ways that we can do this, and how to hit it head on. And actually, you bring up like some harsh realities, like sometimes hearing it from someone else, but sometimes hearing it from yourself too can be pretty harsh. And I'm reading the David Goggins book, and
Can't Hurt Me,
yeah, and there's no sugarcoat. Word said to him was from his mouth in front of the mirror too, right? So sometimes
yep,
we try to brush it over and give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, but sometimes you got to be hit between the eyes and realize it. So did you, because you said you weren't happy at that time and it was causing you to behave, do you think there was just one specific thing, or do you think it was kind of a buildup with just,
you know, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this lately, which is funny, just because I'm still in my journey,
right?
If you will. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. Just a lot of anger and frustration from things from my childhood that I never dealt with and just kind of passed them off.
Okay.
You know, a lot of stuff came, I'll say easily, you know, and just kind of sloughed off the struggles, and just kind of, and I think the way I did that, which is really unfortunate, because I think I missed out on a lot of opportunities, and which is why I'm so dedicated now to getting back into the ultra circuit and really crushing off some of these milestones, is because a lot of things I just, you know, oh, well, I do it. Oh, if I didn't do it, I'll just move on to something else. And I think of a lot of stuff where I did half-ass, and, you know, it's disappointing, right? You live a whole life and you realize you miss on so many opportunities just because you kind of slide on through. And I think some of that probably led to my frustrations, was now because as you get older and you realize that as you're moving into new realms and pushing yourself further, but you didn't build your base of skills and what you needed to succeed in this stage. So you kind of coasted through and said, yeah, well, this is great. Because I used to do really well in exams, and just going back to school, for example, when I was young, and you do really well in exams, but I'd never do any assignments or nothing. So you weren't really learning it. You're just memorizing what you need to know and move on, right? And you just take that attitude in. Played a lot of sports, was always quite physically active. You know, I played on rep teams and everything else, but I never really dedicated my off season to training and stuff, to that kind of stuff, because you're young, you're just having fun and stuff. And a lot of it was just kind of floating through, kind of like a stream, right? You're kind of following it, kind of taking the path that it leads you, kind of resistance. And I don't think that's the right way to go about things. And I just feel a lot of that culminated with, like I mentioned, some frustrations on things that spurred previously, just from my parents and whatnot. That relationship my biological father, my stepdad's incredible, but just from that kind of relationship there, there's a lot of frustration from that standpoint as well. And I just, it's funny because I look at it now and it's all me. I had to own all of it. And going back to Goggins and that mindset with extreme ownership with some of the Navy SEALs and stuff, Leif Babin and Jocko Willink and stuff is in that mindset as well. You're just owning your responsibilities, owning your accountabilities. And I think that was the turning point. That was the hard point, was sitting there. I didn't want to, and I think having that internal battle with myself, if that makes sense, for a long time, knowing it was there, knowing that I needed to make the change, knowing that I was the one at fault for so long. And, I think that was my problem, was just hanging on for a long time, as long as possible. Right. And you're pushing away. I'd push away Andrea emotionally. Right. And just kind of like I said, I was kind of closed in, but grumpy. So she didn't know what was going on. Didn't really have no means to help me. I look at my business partner, Curtis. I was harsh to him, and I wanted stuff, but I wasn't willing to do other things on my own. So there's a lot of things that culminated there that came to an end where I said, okay, enough is enough, and just said, I can't do this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. It's probably the toughest thing to admit it to yourself. And then once you do that, I think that's where the breakthrough starts to happen.
Absolutely.
And it's not like it's like, okay, this is it. I realize it now and it's all good. Because you just said it's still a process. It's ongoing, right? So,
well, I haven't, I'll share it on here. I don't care. We're sharing it now. Anyways, we're open. I haven't told anyone else. There was a night. It was on a November night. I was sitting there and we're on the couch, and I was sitting there and I just broke down. And it was like later, after through all this was going on and all this was culminating and stuff. And I was just sitting there, and Andrea looks at me. She's like, "What is going on?" We were watching some stupid show or something.
Right.
Like, obviously nothing that would ever cause a crying.
Right.
But I don't typically ever act like that ever. And I did. And I just totally broke down. And she's just like, "What is going on?" And I said, "I can't do this. Like, I can't live like this. I can't be this guy that who I want to be and what I am are two different things." And it's like, okay, well, to get to that person who you want to be, you need to change. You need to drive yourself to that, right? You need to get in the car. You need to drive down to the store and buy that item. Terrible analogy, but essentially, like, you have to get in, you have to take that step.
Yeah. No. And it's small steps too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's an end goal, but there's got to be a lot of steps, and that's always makes it a little bit more bearable too. But thank you so much for not only taking the time to drive all this way, but to share like what I think is kind of important. I think a lot of people, there's various degrees with struggles, but just knowing that there's things we can do out there, and that it's not just you. It's like everybody deals with stuff like this, and so it's important that we know that there's avenues to go through that can help. So I appreciate that, and being so exposed with us here on the show. But we do have a 6-mile run we got to get to, so starting to wrap things up, and I'm sure you know where we're going with this here. The last question is, Chris, you are here as someone completely interesting, but if you would like to pick someone, and I'm not saying they have to come on, but who would you find interesting that you would like to have on this podcast?
I think he's an interesting cat, and I think he'd make a great guest for you. Would be Jim Chernichen. If you could get Jim on here, I think he'd be, he runs solo on his bike. He does these ultras down in the States. He just kind of camps. He does his own thing. Yeah. He's an interesting character that I think would have an interesting story to share with people.
I know of him, but I don't know if I've ever actually met him. So that might be a good opportunity.
I'll introduce you to him. Awesome. I'll connect you with him. He's an interesting cat. And before you go, I do want to say it's not all doom and gloom. So from where we were over talking about that, everything is a complete 180. Honestly, it is. Business is booming. The relationship with the family and the wife is never been better. Like, we are having a blast, and it's just everything. Like, I don't have any resentment to anything anymore. It's just totally not internalizing stuff. Right. You know how you get sometimes you'd kind of look at a situation and for no reason at all, it has no bearing on you, but he would let it bother you. It like, yes. Oh, well, they're doing that. Oh, well, how come, blah, blah, for no reason. Like, there's no reason for it at all. 100%. And that's how I was getting. And it's unbearable to live. So, yeah. No, you're right. And I was going to say too,
I'm not as active on the social media, but when I do see you, you look like you're having a pretty good time. You're a lot of family time with the kids, and
Yeah.
you know, the fun selfies are starting to come out there too, which I much prefer to see on social media rather than people sharing the doom and gloom. So
Yeah, for sure.
thanks for being the guy that's not. So once again.
Well, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, to be fair. I'm not on Facebook very much. I'm really
Right,
terrible
right,
on Facebook.
right. But Instagram too. Actually, I forgot to mention this too. So it's kind of an offshoot of what you do for a living. The project solutions guy.
Yeah. So I created this moniker because it's something that people can relate to. And I took a different approach because a lot of people in my industry don't do this. They're very professional. They're very, not that they're not professional, but just to be clear that up. But a lot of people, they want to wear their suit and tie. They want to go and kind of, you're dealing with oil execs. Quite often you're dealing with management and everything else. Well, I took a different approach and said, you know what, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to go on TikTok. I'm going to talk about these, share these conversations and stuff like that. And so, but I said, well, if I'm going to do that, I need to have a moniker that people can relate to. So I created the Project Solutions guy.
So we'll leave it at that. So I just wanted to tag that in there so that people can find that on Instagram, because it's pretty creative. Let's face it. It's a great way to get some messages out there. So once again, my guest here has been Chris Postill. If you've enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a like and a subscription, and check out some of the other episodes as well. You can find us on social media through Pool and Radio, and then of course all our episodes too on your favorite podcast provider by searching Pool and Radio or Now for Someone Completely Interesting. Once again, my guest, Chris Postill. Thank you so much.